The air in the old Victorian house had a certain stillness to it, a silence that hummed with unspoken stories. For Sarah, it was the sound of home, the backdrop to the laughter and occasional tantrums of her 5-year-old daughter, Lily. Mark, her husband, a pragmatic engineer, often joked that the house itself was the third member of their family, with its creaky floors and whispering pipes. They had bought it for its charm, its sprawling garden where Lily could play, never truly considering the weight of its history. Lily had always been a bright child, imaginative beyond her years. It wasn't unusual for her to have elaborate tea parties with her stuffed animals or narrate grand adventures in the woods behind their house. So, when she started talking about Silas, Sarah and Mark initially dismissed it as a normal phase of childhood fantasy. Silas, according to Lily, was a boy with eyes like moss agates and hair the color of dried leaves. He lived in the tall oak tree at the edge of their property and would often visit Lily in her room at night. First, it was endearing. Lily would recount their conversations with a seriousness that was almost comical. Silas had told her secrets about the birds that nested in the oak, about the way the moon painted silver patterns on the bedroom floor, and even about the lost button under Sarah's favorite armchair. Small details, easily explained away by a child's keen observation and active imagination. But as the weeks turned into months, Silas became more integrated into Lily's life. He wasn't just a character in her stories. He was a constant presence. Lily would set an extra place at the dinner table for him, insisting that he was just invisible to grown-ups. She would talk to the empty air, her face animated, sometimes giggling at a private joke, sometimes furrowing her brow in apparent deep conversation. Sarah started to feel a prickle of unease. She had mentioned it to Mark, who had shrugged it off, attributing it to Lily's creative spirit. "She'll grow out of it, Sarah," he'd said, his eyes focused on the blueprints spread across the kitchen table. "It's better than her staring at a screen all day." But it wasn't just the persistence of Silas that bothered Sarah. It was the subtle changes in Lily herself. She seemed to know things she shouldn't. One afternoon, Sarah was searching for a necklace she had misplaced weeks ago. Lily, without prompting, walked to a dusty box in the attic, opened it, and pointed to the necklace tangled among old photographs. "Silas said you put it there," she explained simply. The attic was a place Lily rarely visited, and Sarah had no memory of putting the necklace in that particular box. It was a small incident, easily rationalized, but it planted a seed of doubt in Sarah's mind. Could this Silas be more than just an imaginary friend? Then there were the whispers. Sarah started hearing them at night, faint rustling sounds that seemed to come from Lily's room. When she would quietly open the door to check on her daughter, Lily would be fast asleep, her small hand sometimes reaching out as if holding another. The whispers would stop as soon as Sarah entered, leaving her with a chilling sense of unease. One particularly unsettling incident involved a neighbor's cat, a sleek black feline named Midnight that Lily adored. One morning, Lily came downstairs with a drawing. It depicted Midnight with one eye crossed out in red crayon. Sarah was about to dismiss it as childish doodling when their neighbor frantically knocked on their door. Midnight had been found in their garden, injured. Its left eye was severely damaged. Mark was furious, assuming Lily had somehow hurt the cat. But Lily, her eyes wide with fear, insisted. Silas said Midnight was watching him. Silas doesn't like to be watched. Sarah felt a cold dread creep into her heart. This was no longer just a game. There was something else going on, something she couldn't explain away with childish fantasy. She started paying closer attention to Lily's interactions with Silas, trying to decipher the nature of this unseen companion. Was he a comfort to her daughter, or something more sinister? The oak tree in their garden, once a picturesque part of their property, now seemed to loom over the house, its branches like skeletal fingers reaching towards Lily's window. Sarah would find herself staring at it, a sense of foreboding washing over her. What secrets did its rustling leaves hold? And who or what was Silas really? The happy facade of their family life was beginning to crack, revealing a disquieting mystery that Sarah knew she had to unravel, for Lily's sake, and perhaps for their own. The stillness of the old house now felt less like peace and more like the held breath before a storm. Sarah's unease grew into a gnawing anxiety. She started documenting Lily's interactions with Silas, jotting down their conversations, the dates, and any unusual occurrences that followed. Mark remained skeptical, suggesting Sarah was overreacting, letting her imagination run wild just like Lily. Their differing views created a subtle tension in their marriage, a hairline fracture in the foundation of their seemingly perfect life. One afternoon, while Lily was playing with Silas in her room, Sarah decided to try and engage. She gently knocked and entered, a warm smile on her face. "Lily, honey, can you tell Silas that Mommy wants to say hello?" Lily turned, her brow furrowed in concentration, as if listening intently. After a moment, she looked back at Sarah. "Silas says he's shy. He doesn't like new people. But he's been Lily's friend for so long," Sarah countered, trying to keep her tone light. "Doesn't he want to meet my best friend's mommy?" Lily tilted her head. "Silas says you can't see him because you don't believe." The words hung in the air, a chilling pronouncement from an unseen entity. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. It was more than just a child's game. There was a conviction in Lily's voice, a certainty that unsettled Sarah deeply. Driven by a growing need to understand, Sarah started researching imaginary friends. She devoured articles and books on child psychology, looking for explanations, for reassurance that this was within the realm of normal development. While many sources spoke of imaginary companions as a healthy part of a child's growth, none described a scenario quite like Lily's, where the imaginary friend seemed to have a tangible influence on their lives. She even considered the possibility of Lily having an overactive imagination stemming from some underlying anxiety. She tried talking to Lily about her feelings, about school, about anything that might be causing her stress. But Lily seemed happy, well-adjusted, her only constant being Silas. The mystery deepened when Sarah started noticing physical signs that seemed to corroborate Lily's stories. Small objects would inexplicably move in Lily's room when she was supposedly alone with Silas. A tower of blocks would topple over. A book would fall from the shelf. When Sarah questioned Lily, she would simply say, "Silas did it." One evening, Sarah found a small, intricately carved wooden bird on Lily's bedside table. It was unlike any toy Lily owned. When Sarah asked where it came from, Lily replied, "Silas made it for me, from a branch of his tree." The detail in the carving was remarkable, too detailed for a 5-year-old to imagine, let alone create. Sarah decided to investigate the oak tree. Armed with a flashlight, she ventured into the garden late one night. The tree was old and imposing, its gnarled branches reaching towards the sky like twisted arms. She searched around the base, her flashlight beam dancing across the tangled roots and fallen leaves. She found nothing unusual, no sign of anyone, real or imaginary. However, as she looked up into the dense canopy, she noticed something glinting in the moonlight, nestled in a high fork of the branches. The next morning, with Mark reluctantly holding the ladder, Sarah climbed up. There, partially hidden by moss and leaves, was a small, hollowed-out bird's nest. Inside, she found several smooth, moss-green stones that looked exactly like the color Lily had described for Silas's eyes, and a few dried leaves the same shade as his imaginary hair. Mark, seeing the stones, finally showed a flicker of concern. "Where did these come from?" he asked, his skepticism momentarily overshadowed by a hint of bewilderment. "Lily said they were Silas's," Sarah replied, her voice barely a whisper. Back in the house, Sarah found an old photograph album. She had been looking for a picture of her grandmother but stumbled upon a section dedicated to the history of their house. One faded photograph, taken in the early 1900s, showed a young boy standing near the very oak tree in their garden. His eyes, even in the grainy black and white, seemed dark and intense. His hair was thick and unruly. The resemblance to Lily's description of Silas was uncanny. Flipping through the subsequent pages, Sarah found another photograph, a newspaper clipping tucked between the brittle pages. The headline read, "Local boy missing after fall from oak tree." The article detailed the tragic accident of a young boy named Silas, who had fallen from a tree on the property over a century ago and was never found. Sarah's blood ran cold. The moss-green eyes, the leaf-colored hair, the oak tree. It all aligned with Lily's descriptions. Could it be possible? Could Lily be seeing the ghost of this long-lost boy? She showed the photograph and the clipping to Mark, whose skepticism finally crumbled. The color drained from his face as he stared at the image of the boy named Silas. The rational world they had inhabited seemed to tilt on its axis, replaced by a chilling reality they couldn't comprehend. Their focus shifted from dismissing Lily's imaginary friend to understanding the potential implications. Was Silas just a harmless ghost seeking companionship, or was there something more to his presence? The secrets of the old house were beginning to stir, and Sarah and Mark found themselves on the precipice of a terrifying unknown, their daughter at the center of it all. The whispers in the night now seemed to carry a name, a history, a tragedy that had been silently woven into the fabric of their home. The discovery of the newspaper clipping sent a shockwave through Sarah and Mark. The whimsical notion of an imaginary friend had been replaced by the unsettling possibility of a spectral presence. Their immediate concern shifted to Lily's well-being. Was Silas a benevolent spirit, or could his presence pose a threat? They tried to talk to Lily about the historical Silas, gently showing her the photograph. Lily's reaction was unexpected. Instead of surprise, her eyes lit up with recognition. "That's him," she exclaimed. "That's Silas, but he looks different." When Sarah asked what she meant, Lily explained that the Silas she knew was always translucent, like shimmery air, and that he wore old-fashioned clothes. This detail further solidified the connection to the boy in the photograph, who was dressed in clothing typical of the early 20th century. Driven by a need for answers, Sarah delved deeper into the history of their house and the family who had lived there generations ago. She spent hours at the local library, poring over old records, census data, and local history books. She learned about the tragic life of the young Silas, an only child who was said to have been deeply attached to the oak tree in their garden, his favorite place to play. The circumstances surrounding his fall were vague, described only as a terrible accident. As Sarah pieced together the fragments of Silas's short life, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Other families who had lived in the house over the years had reported strange occurrences, unexplained noises, and a general feeling of unease. Some even mentioned their children having an unseen playmate. These stories, once dismissed as folklore or exaggerated tales, now took on a chilling significance. Meanwhile, Lily's interactions with Silas became more intense. She started exhibiting knowledge of events from the past, details about the original family who had lived in the house, things she could not possibly have known. She spoke of a hidden room in the attic, a room Sarah and Mark had never found. When they searched again, following Lily's precise directions, behind the loose panel near the chimney, they discovered a small, dusty room concealed behind a false wall. Inside, they found a collection of old toys, books with yellowed pages, and a small wooden box. In the box, nestled among dried flowers, was a tarnished silver locket. It was engraved with the initials SM. Sarah carefully opened it. Inside were two tiny portraits, one of a young boy with moss-green eyes and leaf-colored hair, and another of a woman with a sad, gentle smile, presumably Silas and his mother. The discovery of the hidden room and the locket was undeniable proof that Lily Silas was not merely a figment of her imagination. He was tied to the history of the house in a profound and heartbreaking way. However, with this revelation came a growing sense of dread. Lily started exhibiting changes in her behavior. She became withdrawn, often speaking in hushed tones as if Silas had instructed her to keep secrets. She seemed increasingly attached to her unseen friend, sometimes becoming agitated if Sarah or Mark tried to interfere with their playtime. One evening, Lily became inconsolable when Sarah suggested she play with other children. "Silas doesn't like other children," she sobbed. "He says they'll take me away from him." This possessiveness was deeply unsettling. Sarah and Mark began to fear that Silas's presence was becoming unhealthy for Lily, isolating her from the real world. They wondered if the tragic circumstances of his death had somehow tethered him to their daughter, perhaps seeking the companionship he had lost so long ago. The climax arrived during a fierce thunderstorm. The old house groaned and creaked under the onslaught of wind and rain. Lily became increasingly agitated, claiming that Silas was scared. Suddenly, a violent gust of wind rattled the windows, and a large branch from the oak tree outside crashed against the side of the house near Lily's room. Lily screamed, not in fear of the storm, but as if in response to some unseen event. "Silas! No!" she cried out. Sarah and Mark rushed into her room to find her staring at the window, her face pale with terror. "He's hurt," she whispered. "The tree. It tried to take him." In that moment, a chilling realization washed over Sarah. Perhaps Silas wasn't just a passive presence. Perhaps he had a will of his own, and his connection to Lily was stronger, and potentially more dangerous, than they had imagined. The tragedy of his past might have left him clinging to the present, unwilling to let go of the one person who could see and interact with him. The idyllic image of their old house had shattered, revealing a darker, more sinister truth. Their daughter's imaginary friend was real, and his reality threatened to consume them all. The immediate aftermath of the storm was filled with a palpable tension. Lily remained distressed, convinced that Silas had been harmed when the tree branch fell. Sarah and Mark tried to comfort her, their own fear mingling with a desperate need to understand the extent of Silas's influence. They decided to seek guidance. Sarah contacted a local historian who had written extensively about the area's folklore and reported paranormal activity. He listened to their story with a serious expression, confirming that their house had a long-standing reputation for being haunted, particularly by the spirit of a young boy who had died in a tragic accident involving the old oak tree. The historian suggested that Silas might be tethered to the house, unable to move on due to the sudden and traumatic nature of his death, and that Lily's sensitivity had allowed her to connect with him. He cautioned them about the dangers of such attachments, especially if the spirit was unwilling to let go. Following the historian's advice, Sarah and Mark decided to try and help Silas find peace. They talked to Lily about Silas, explaining that he was a boy who had lived a long time ago and that he might be lonely and scared. They suggested that perhaps Silas needed to be remembered and acknowledged, but also encouraged to move on. With Lily's help, they pieced together more details about Silas's life. Lily spoke of his love for the birds in the oak tree, his favorite toy, a small wooden horse they found in the hidden room, and his deep sadness at being alone. They decided to create a small memorial for Silas under the oak tree, placing the wooden horse, some wildflowers Lily had picked, and the silver locket they had found. They also shared Silas's story with Lily, explaining his accident and the fact that he had been separated from his family. They spoke about the importance of remembering him, but also about the natural cycle of life and death, gently suggesting that Silas might find peace if he could let go of his earthly ties. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and Mark kept a close watch on Lily. Gradually, her interactions with Silas seemed to change. She still talked about him, but the possessiveness and secrecy began to fade. She started playing more with other children and seemed more engaged with the real world. One evening, Lily came to Sarah with a drawing. It depicted a young boy with moss-green eyes and leaf-colored hair standing beneath a large oak tree, but this time, he was smiling and waving. Beside him was a translucent figure of a woman with a gentle smile, holding his hand. "Silas says goodbye," Lily explained softly. "He's going with his mommy now." A wave of emotion washed over Sarah. Whether it was Lily's imagination processing their efforts or a genuine farewell, there was a sense of closure in the air. The whispers in the night gradually ceased, and the house seemed to settle into a calmer, more peaceful silence. Life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy for the family. The oak tree remained in their garden, a reminder of the boy named Silas and the extraordinary events that had unfolded in their home. Sarah and Mark often looked at it, a mix of sadness and relief in their hearts, grateful that Lily seemed to have moved forward. However, the experience left an indelible mark on them. They had glimpsed a reality beyond their understanding, a world where the veil between the living and the departed was thin. They would never look at their old Victorian house, or at Lily's vivid imagination, in the same way again. And so, the story of Lily and her imaginary friend, who turned out to be real, serves as a chilling reminder that sometimes, the most fantastical tales hold a kernel of truth, and that the past is never truly gone. It can linger in the shadows, waiting for someone to see, to hear, to believe. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of the unexplained and the mysterious, please give this video a like, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our future uploads. What do you think about Lily's experience? Have you ever encountered anything unexplainable? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you. Until next time, sleep tight, and maybe keep an ear out for whispers in the night.